At around 3:15 p.m. on April 10, 2025, a helicopter crashed over the Hudson River, claiming the lives of all 6 people on board, including 3 children. The Bell 407 helicopter, conducting a sightseeing tour, went down after witnesses described a sudden loss of control. Chilling eyewitness footage circulating on social media shows how the aircraft spiraled into the water near Manhattan, sending a plume of spray skyward upon impact. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately and managed to retrieve 4 passengers from the river. 2 of them were alive and were immediately rushed to the nearest hospital, but sadly they died from their injuries. At the time of publishing, authorities have confirmed the deaths of all 6 souls on board. A family of 2 Spanish adults, Agustin Escobar and his wife, Merce Camprubi Montal, their 3 children aged 4, 5, and 11, and the pilot. A disturbing radio call made by the pilot moments before the crash revealed that the helicopter had run out of fuel. CEO of New York Helicopters Michael Roth confirmed the aircraft was out of fuel just minutes into the trip. He told the Telegraph newspaper, "He called in that he was landing and that he needed fuel, and it should have taken him about 3 minutes to arrive, but 20 minutes later, he didn't arrive." Roth stated he began receiving messages before one of his other pilots flew over the river and saw the helicopter upside down. Roth said, "We're all devastated. Every employee in our company is devastated. My wife has not stopped crying. The death of the child of any human being is a monumental disaster." The Spanish family is reported to have arrived that very morning into New York and were excited to make this sightseeing trip their first priority. Eyewitnesses along the riverbank described the terrifying scene as the helicopter descended erratically before crashing into the water. "It started shaking and then just nosedived," one witness recounted. Another, who had been jogging along the riverwalk, said, "I saw it spinning, and it looked like the pilot was trying to level it out, but it just didn't recover. The sound was deafening when it hit the water." Emergency services arrived swiftly, but the severity of the crash left little hope for those on board. It marks one of the deadliest New York City helicopter crashes in nearly 20 years, marking yet another devastating incident in the Hudson River's long history of aviation-related tragedies. The Hudson River has long been an unwitting stage for aviation drama, its waters serving as both a savior and a graveyard for aircraft in distress. This latest tragedy recalls the river's most famous aviation event, the Miracle on the Hudson. On January 15, 2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549, an Airbus A320 carrying 155 passengers and crew, struck a flock of Canada geese shortly after takeoff from LaGuardia Airport. The bird strike disabled both engines, leaving Captain Chesley, Sully Sullenberger, and First Officer Jeffrey Skiles with no option but to attempt a water landing. Against all odds, the aircraft touched down smoothly on the river, and all 155 souls on board were rescued. The sight of passengers standing on the wings of the plane as it floated on the icy waters remains one of the most iconic images in aviation history, a testament to human skill and resilience. The Miracle on the Hudson is often described as one of the greatest feats of aviation in modern history, but it was not without its moments of sheer terror. The flight began like any other, with passengers settling into their seats for the short trip to Charlotte, North Carolina. Among them were business travelers, families, and even a retired couple embarking on a long-awaited vacation. Just 3 minutes after takeoff, disaster struck. A flock of Canada geese, invisible to the crew until it was too late, collided with the aircraft. The sound of the impact was described by passengers as a loud boom, followed by an eerie silence as both engines failed. Inside the cockpit, Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Skiles quickly assessed the situation. With no thrust from either engine and an altitude of just 3,200 feet, they had mere seconds to decide their course of action. Returning to LaGuardia was impossible, as was reaching Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. The only option was the Hudson River. "This is the captain," Sully said over the intercom. "Brace for impact." His calm tone belied the enormity of what was about to happen. The descent was rapid but controlled, a testament to Sully's decades of experience as a pilot. He angled the plane's nose slightly upward to minimize the impact and ensure the fuselage remained intact. Passengers later described the landing as both violent and surreal. "It felt like we hit a brick wall," one survivor recalled. Another said, "The water came rushing up the windows. I thought we were going to sink immediately." Panic erupted as the cabin filled with the smell of fuel and the icy chill of January air. But Sully's meticulous planning extended beyond the landing itself. He had positioned the aircraft so that it floated long enough for passengers to evacuate. Flight attendants sprang into action, guiding people toward the exits and onto the wings. Meanwhile, ferries and rescue boats converged on the scene, their crews pulling survivors from the frigid water. The entire operation, from impact to evacuation, took just minutes. Not a single life was lost. The aftermath of the miracle on the Hudson was not without controversy. While Sully was hailed as a hero by the public, the airline and the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, initially questioned his decision to land on the river. Simulations suggested that he might have been able to return to LaGuardia, but Sully defended his actions, arguing that the simulations failed to account for the human element of decision-making under extreme stress. Ultimately, the NTSB concluded that his actions were not only justified, but exemplary, cementing his legacy as one of aviation's greats. But not all stories on the Hudson have ended so miraculously. Decades earlier, in the early hours of a bitterly cold winter morning in 1956, a military transport plane departed from Stewart Air Force Base in Newburgh, New York, on a routine training mission. The aircraft, a C-124 Globemaster, was carrying supplies intended for Europe, part of the United States' broader efforts to maintain its military readiness during the tense post-war years. The Globemaster, known for its size and reliability, was often referred to as the Old Shaky, a nickname that reflected both its lumbering flight characteristics and the respect it commanded among the crews who flew it. On this particular day, however, the nickname would take on a tragic new meaning. The flight began uneventfully, with the crew of 6 seasoned airmen performing their standard checks as the plane climbed steadily into the frigid sky. The Hudson River stretched out below them, its icy surface glinting faintly in the weak winter sunlight. The river was a familiar sight to the crew, a constant companion on their training routes, and they paid it little mind as they focused on their instruments. But just minutes into the flight, something went catastrophically wrong. Eyewitnesses on the ground reported hearing a loud, unnatural noise, described variously as a bang or a metallic screech, coming from the sky. Moments later, the massive aircraft began to lose altitude, its engine sputtering and trailing smoke. One witness, a fisherman who had been preparing his boat along the riverbank near West Point, described the scene as surreal. "It was like watching a giant bird with a broken wing," he said. "You could tell the pilot was fighting to keep it in the air, but it was coming down fast." The crew, realizing the severity of their situation, issued a distress call and attempted to turn the aircraft back toward Stewart Air Force Base. But the plane's trajectory made it clear that they would not make it. With West Point and the surrounding towns directly in their path, the pilot made the fateful decision to aim for the Hudson River, hoping to minimize casualties on the ground. It was a selfless act, one that would ultimately cost the crew their lives, but likely saved many others. As the Globemaster descended, its enormous frame began to break apart under the strain. Pieces of the plane rained down into the river and onto the nearby banks, creating a chaotic scene that drew residents out of their homes despite the freezing temperatures. The final moments of the crash were described in harrowing detail by those who witnessed it. "It hit the water with such force that it was like an explosion," said one local resident. "There was this huge wave, and then everything went quiet." Rescue efforts began almost immediately, with military personnel from West Point and local civilians rushing to the scene. Boats were launched into the icy river, their crews braving the freezing water in a desperate attempt to reach the wreckage. But the conditions were brutal, and the debris field was extensive. Divers who entered the water faced near impossible odds, battling strong currents and sub-zero temperatures as they searched for survivors. Despite their heroic efforts, there was little they could do. All 6 crew members perished in the crash, their bodies recovered only after hours of painstaking work. The aftermath of the disaster was marked by grief and reflection. The crew members were hailed as heroes for their actions in steering the plane away from populated areas, a decision that likely prevented a far greater loss of life. Their sacrifice was not forgotten, and a memorial was later erected near the crash site to honor their bravery and service. For the residents of the Hudson Valley, the crash was a stark reminder of the risks faced by military personnel, even during peacetime. The investigation into the crash revealed that a mechanical failure in one of the plane's engines had triggered the chain of events leading to the disaster. The exact cause of the failure was never conclusively determined, but it highlighted the challenges of maintaining aging aircraft in a rapidly evolving technological landscape. The incident also spurred changes in military aviation protocols, including more rigorous maintenance checks and updated training programs for emergency scenarios. For the families of the crew, the loss was devastating. Letters and personal effects recovered from the wreckage provided a poignant glimpse into the lives of the men who had perished. One letter, written by a young airman to his wife just days before the crash, spoke of his excitement about returning home after the training mission. "Tell the kids I'll be back before they know it," he wrote, "and save me a piece of that apple pie." The letter, stained and crumpled but still legible, became a symbol of the human cost of the tragedy. The 1956 crash of the Globemaster remains one of the Hudson River's most somber aviation incidents, a moment when the river's icy depths became a final resting place for 6 men who had dedicated their lives to service. It is a story of sacrifice and resilience, of a community coming together in the face of loss, and of the enduring bond between those who take to the skies and those who remain on the ground. Even decades later, the memory of that fateful day lingers, a reminder of the risks and sacrifices that underpin the freedoms we so often take for granted. 20 years later, there would be yet another tragedy over the Hudson River, becoming the site of one of the most devastating aviation disasters in its history once again. A sightseeing helicopter carrying eager tourists on what was meant to be a joyful and scenic flight over New York City collided mid-air with a small Cessna airplane. The collision occurred in broad daylight, with clear skies offering no warning of the catastrophe that was about to unfold. Both aircraft plunged into the Hudson River, killing all aboard. The tragedy shocked the city and the nation, raising serious concerns about the safety of the increasingly crowded airspace over the river. The sightseeing helicopter, operated by a now-defunct tour company, had taken off from a heliport in Lower Manhattan. The passengers on board were a mix of tourists from around the world, excited to see the iconic skyline, the Statue of Liberty, and the sprawling Hudson River from above. Among them were a young couple celebrating their honeymoon, a father and his teenage son on a long-awaited trip to New York, and a solo traveler with a passion for aerial photography. Their excitement was palpable as the helicopter lifted off, its rotors slicing through the air. The Cessna, a small private aircraft, was piloted by a local businessman who frequently flew short routes for work. On this particular day, he was accompanied by a friend, both of them experienced in aviation but unaware of the danger that lay ahead. The Cessna had taken off from a small airfield in New Jersey and was cruising at a low altitude, following the river as a visual guide. While the pilot had filed a flight plan, the airspace over the Hudson was notoriously congested, with helicopters, small planes, and commercial aircraft all vying for space in the skies. Eyewitnesses described the moment of impact as sudden and horrifying. One man who had been fishing along the riverbank recalled hearing the distinct hum of the helicopter's rotors and the faint buzz of the Cessna's engine. "I looked up and saw the 2 aircraft coming closer and closer," he said. "It was like they were on a collision course, but it happened so fast. There was a loud crash, and then pieces of the helicopter and plane just started falling into the river." Another witness, a jogger on the Hudson River Greenway, described the scene as chaotic and surreal. You could see the helicopter spinning out of control, and the Cessna just broke apart mid-air. It was like something out of a nightmare. People were screaming and pointing, but there was nothing anyone could do. The impact sent debris raining down into the Hudson, creating a scene of devastation on the water. Rescue boats were dispatched immediately, their crews navigating through the floating wreckage in a desperate search for survivors. The strong currents of the Hudson made the operation even more challenging, as pieces of the aircraft were quickly carried downstream. Despite the best efforts of the rescue teams, there were no survivors. The bodies of the victims were recovered over the following days, a grim task that underscored the tragedy of the event. The aftermath of the collision was marked by grief and outrage. The families of the victims were left to grapple with the sudden and senseless loss of their loved ones. For the young couple on their honeymoon, what should have been the start of a beautiful journey together ended in heartbreak for their families. The father and son, who had been looking forward to bonding over the shared experience of their trip, were mourned by a devastated mother and wife. The solo traveler, whose passion for photography had brought him to the skies, left behind a portfolio of breathtaking images that now served as a poignant reminder of his life. The tragedy also sparked a heated debate about the safety of the airspace over the Hudson River. At the time, the airspace was considered an uncontrolled zone, meaning that pilots of small aircraft and helicopters were not required to communicate with air traffic controllers. This lack of regulation, combined with the growing popularity of sightseeing tours and private flights, created a perfect storm of risks. The 1976 collision became a turning point, prompting aviation authorities to reevaluate the rules governing the skies above the Hudson. In the wake of the disaster, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, implemented a series of changes aimed at improving safety. These included the establishment of dedicated flight corridors for helicopters and small planes, as well as mandatory communication protocols for pilots operating in the area. The new regulations were designed to reduce the likelihood of mid-air collisions by ensuring that all aircraft followed clearly defined routes and maintained constant contact with air traffic control. However, the changes were not without controversy. Some operators of sightseeing tours argued that the new rules would make their businesses less viable, citing increased costs and logistical challenges. Meanwhile, advocates for stricter regulations pointed to the 1976 collision as a stark reminder of the consequences of inaction. The debate highlighted the tension between economic interests and public safety, a dynamic that continues to shape discussions about aviation policy to this day. The 1976 collision also had a lasting impact on the way pilots were trained. Emphasis was placed on situational awareness, with new training programs designed to help pilots better anticipate and respond to potential conflicts in crowded airspace. Simulator exercises began to include scenarios involving near misses and mid-air collisions, ensuring that pilots were better prepared for the challenges of flying in congested areas. For the residents of New York City, the memory of the 1976 collision remains a sobering reminder of the risks that come with living in one of the world's busiest metropolitan areas. The Hudson River, while a symbol of the city's vitality and resilience, also serves as a silent witness to its tragedies. The sight of rescue boats navigating the river in the aftermath of the collision is etched into the collective memory of those who lived through it, a haunting image that underscores the fragility of life. In the years since the 1976 disaster, the skies over the Hudson became safer, thanks in large part to the lessons learned from that fateful day. Yet the river's history as a site of aviation drama continued to evolve, with each new incident adding another chapter to its complex narrative. The 1976 collision stood as a pivotal moment in that history, a tragedy that reshaped the way we think about air safety and reminded us of the human cost of complacency. Not long after, the 1980s brought yet another harrowing moment over the river, claiming the lives of a further 5 souls. In this particular incident, a commuter flight en route to Albany encountered severe turbulence over the Hudson Valley, forcing the pilot to attempt an emergency landing on the river. The crash, while not as widely known as other aviation disasters, became a stark reminder of the challenges faced by pilots flying smaller aircraft and the importance of water landing preparedness. The flight in question was a twin-engine commuter aircraft, a type commonly used for short regional routes during the era. On board were 19 passengers and 3 crew members, including the pilot and co-pilot. The passengers were a mix of business professionals, students traveling home, and a young family of 3 heading to visit relatives in Albany. The atmosphere on board was typical for a short-haul flight. Some passengers reading newspapers, others dozing off, and a few chatting quietly. The crew had completed their pre-flight checks without issue, and the plane had taken off from Newark Airport on a clear morning with no indication of the drama that would soon unfold. Approximately 20 minutes into the flight, as the aircraft cruised at an altitude of around 8,000 feet, it encountered an unexpected weather disturbance. Reports later described this as a sudden pocket of severe turbulence, likely caused by a combination of wind shear and unstable air currents over the Hudson Valley. Passengers recalled feeling the plane lurch violently, sending drinks and belongings flying through the cabin. "It felt like the plane dropped out of the sky," said one survivor. "People were screaming, and the overhead bins flew open. It was chaos." Inside the cockpit, the situation was equally dire. The sudden turbulence had caused significant structural strain on the aircraft, and the pilots quickly realized they were losing control. One of the engines began to sputter, possibly due to debris ingestion or mechanical failure exacerbated by the turbulence. The pilot, an experienced aviator with over 15 years of flying under his belt, knew they would not be able to make it to Albany or return to Newark. With the plane rapidly losing altitude and the Hudson River directly below, he made the decision to attempt an emergency water landing. The announcement to brace for impact came over the intercom, sending a wave of fear through the cabin. Flight attendants hurriedly moved through the aisles, demonstrating the brace position and instructing passengers to don their life vests. For many on board, these moments felt surreal, as though they were caught in a nightmare from which they couldn't wake. One passenger, a college student traveling home for the holidays, later described the experience. "I remember grabbing the hand of the woman next to me. She was a stranger, but in that moment, we were just 2 people trying to survive. The descent was rapid and uneven, with the plane shaking violently as the pilots fought to maintain control. Witnesses on the ground described seeing the aircraft approaching the river at an awkward angle, its engines emitting intermittent bursts of noise. One fisherman, who had been out on the Hudson that morning, recalled the sight vividly. "I looked up and saw this plane coming in low. It was clear they were in trouble. It hit the water hard, like a skipping stone, and then flipped over." The impact with the river was catastrophic. While the pilots managed to keep the nose of the plane up, the force of the landing caused the fuselage to buckle and the aircraft to capsize. Water began flooding the cabin almost immediately, plunging the passengers and crew into a desperate fight for survival. Those who were seated near the emergency exits had the best chance of escape, but the chaos and disorientation made it difficult for many to find their way out. Survivors later described the panic as people scrambled to unbuckle their seatbelts and navigate the dark, freezing water. Rescue efforts began quickly, with nearby boats rushing to the scene. The strong currents of the Hudson made the operation challenging as debris from the wreckage spread across a wide area. Local fishermen and recreational boaters played a crucial role in pulling survivors from the water, their quick actions likely saving several lives. One rescuer, a retired firefighter who had been out on his boat that morning, described the scene as something out of a disaster movie. He added, "You could hear people screaming for help, and the water was so cold. I don't know how some of them managed to hold on." Of the 22 people on board, 17 survived, including the pilot and 1 flight attendant. Tragically, 5 passengers lost their lives, including the young family of 3. The father, who had been seated near the rear of the plane, reportedly struggled to free himself and his family from their seats as the water rose around them. Their loss was deeply felt, and their story became a poignant symbol of the human cost of the crash. The investigation into the incident revealed several factors that contributed to the tragedy. The turbulence, while severe and largely unpredictable, had exposed vulnerabilities in the aircraft's design, particularly its ability to withstand sudden stress. Additionally, the lack of clear communication between air traffic controllers and the flight crew during the moments leading up to the crash was cited as a contributing factor. The report also highlighted the need for improved water landing protocols, both for pilots and passengers. In the wake of the crash, significant changes were made to the training programs for regional airline pilots. Water landing simulations became a standard part of emergency preparedness training, ensuring that pilots were better equipped to handle similar situations in the future. Additionally, airlines began to place greater emphasis on passenger safety briefings, recognizing that many travelers were unaware of how to properly use life vests or locate emergency exits. For the survivors, the crash left both physical and emotional scars. Many struggled with post-traumatic stress, haunted by the memories of that fateful day. One survivor, who had been seated near the emergency exit, later spoke about the guilt she felt for surviving when others did not. "I kept thinking about the family in the back of the plane," she said. "Why did I make it out when they didn't? It's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life." The 1980s Hudson River crash, while not as widely remembered as other aviation incidents, remains a powerful reminder of the unpredictability of flight and the resilience of the human spirit. The river's role as an unintended runway continued into 1996, when a small cargo plane was forced to make an emergency landing on the Hudson River. While the event didn't claim any lives, it highlighted the dangers of cargo aviation and underscored the importance of quick thinking and skill in averting disaster. The aircraft involved was a twin-engine turboprop, a workhorse of the cargo aviation industry, used to transport goods quickly and efficiently between regional hubs. On this particular flight, the plane was carrying a load of critical medical supplies, including vaccines and blood plasma, destined for hospitals in upstate New York. The pilot, an experienced aviator in his late 40s, was flying solo, as was typical for smaller cargo flights of this nature. Known for his calm demeanor and meticulous attention to detail, he had logged thousands of hours in the cockpit and was well versed in handling emergencies. The flight began without incident, departing from Teterboro Airport in New Jersey on a clear spring morning. The Hudson River, a familiar sight for the pilot, stretched out below as he climbed to cruising altitude. The journey was expected to be routine, a short hop that would deliver life-saving supplies to their destination. However, about 15 minutes into the flight, the pilot noticed a strong smell of fuel in the cockpit. At first, he thought it might be a minor issue, but when the smell grew stronger and warning lights began flashing on the instrument panel, it became clear that the situation was far more serious. The pilot quickly diagnosed the problem as a fuel leak, a potentially catastrophic issue that could lead to engine failure or even an onboard fire. With the nearest airport too far to reach and the plane rapidly losing fuel, he made the decision to attempt an emergency landing on the Hudson River. It was a risky maneuver, but the calm waters of the river offered the best chance of survival and the possibility of preserving the valuable cargo. As the plane descended, the pilot issued a mayday call, alerting air traffic control and nearby vessels to his situation. Witnesses on the ground and on the river described the scene as tense and dramatic. One boater, who had been fishing near the George Washington Bridge, recalled seeing the plane approach at a low altitude. "It was coming in fast, and you could tell the pilot was struggling to keep it steady," he said. "I thought for sure it was going to crash, but somehow he managed to land it on the water." The landing was rough but controlled, with the plane skimming the surface of the river before coming to a stop. The impact sent a spray of water into the air, and for a moment, it seemed as though the aircraft might sink. However, the pilot had executed the landing with such precision that the plane remained afloat long enough for him to escape. Climbing out onto the wing, he waved to nearby boats for assistance. Within minutes, several vessels had converged on the scene, their crews helping to secure the plane and bring the pilot to safety. The rescue operation was swift and efficient, a testament to the coordination between local authorities and the boating community. The pilot, though shaken, was unharmed and insisted on staying at the scene to oversee the recovery of the cargo. Those supplies were meant to save lives, He later said in an interview, "I couldn't just walk away and leave them there." The medical supplies were successfully retrieved from the plane thanks to the quick actions of the rescue teams and the pilot's careful planning. The vaccines and blood plasma, which had been packed in temperature-controlled containers, were found to be intact and were delivered to their intended recipients later that day. The hospitals that received the supplies expressed their gratitude, noting that the timely delivery had a direct impact on patient care. The incident sparked widespread admiration for the pilot's skill and composure under pressure. Aviation experts praised his decision-making, noting that water landings are among the most challenging maneuvers a pilot can perform. Landing on water requires incredible precision, one expert explained. The pilot has to account for factors like speed, angle, and the condition of the water's surface. It's not something you can practice often, so when it happens in real life, it's a true test of skill. While the outcome of the 1996 cargo plane incident was ultimately positive, it also raised important questions about the safety of cargo aviation. The investigation into the fuel leak revealed that it had been caused by a maintenance oversight, a finding that led to stricter regulations for the inspection and servicing of cargo aircraft. Airlines were required to implement more rigorous maintenance protocols, and pilots were given additional training in handling fuel-related emergencies. The incident also highlighted the unique challenges faced by cargo pilots, who often fly alone and must rely entirely on their own judgment in emergency situations. Unlike commercial flights, which have multiple crew members to share responsibilities, cargo pilots are solely responsible for navigating, troubleshooting, and executing emergency procedures. This reality was not lost on the aviation community, which began advocating for better support systems and resources for cargo pilots in the wake of the Hudson River landing. For the pilot involved, the experience was life-changing. Though he continued to fly for several years after the incident, he often spoke about how it had given him a new perspective on the importance of his work. "You don't think about it much when you're flying cargo," he said. "But that day I realized just how much was riding on me getting those supplies to where they needed to go. It's something I'll never forget." The 1996 cargo plane incident, though less dramatic than some of the Hudson River's other aviation stories, remains a powerful example of the skill and dedication of those who take to the skies. It is a story of quick thinking, teamwork, and the determination to protect both lives and livelihoods, even in the face of overwhelming odds. For those who witnessed it and for the communities that benefited from the pilot's actions, it is a reminder that even in moments of crisis, humanity's capacity for resilience and ingenuity shines through. The new millennium brought advancements in aviation technology, but another disaster awaited. A tragic incident, which involved a small private plane piloted by New York Yankees pitcher Corey Lidle, shocked the sports world and reignited debates about aviation safety in metropolitan areas. While the crash did not occur directly in the river, its proximity to the Hudson and the devastating loss of life make it a significant part of the waterways' aviation history. On October 11, 2006, Corey Lidle, a talented pitcher and avid aviation enthusiast, took to the skies in a Cirrus SR-20, a single-engine light aircraft known for its sleek design and advanced safety features. Lidle, who had earned his pilot's license the previous year, was passionate about flying and often spoke of how it gave him a sense of freedom and control. On this particular day, he was joined by his flight instructor, Tyler Stanger, a seasoned aviator with years of experience training new pilots. The pair planned to fly a short route from Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, following the Hudson River as a visual guide before returning to their starting point. The flight began uneventfully, with the Cirrus SR-20 cruising along the Hudson at a low altitude. The route, often referred to as the Hudson River VFR, Visual Flight Rules Corridor, was a popular choice for small aircraft and helicopters, offering breathtaking views of Manhattan and the surrounding area. However, the corridor was also notoriously crowded, with pilots required to maintain constant vigilance to avoid other aircraft. On that day, the skies were clear and visibility was excellent, conditions that seemed ideal for a leisurely flight. As Lidle and Stanger approached Manhattan, They made a series of turns to navigate the airspace. Witnesses on the ground described seeing the plane flying low and steady, its engine humming normally. However, as the aircraft attempted a sharp left turn near the Upper East Side, something went catastrophically wrong. The Cirrus SR-20 failed to complete the turn and instead veered off course, slamming into the 30th floor of a residential high-rise apartment building. The impact caused an explosion that sent flames and debris raining down onto the street below, creating a scene of chaos and panic. The crash claimed the lives of both Little and Stanger, leaving the residents of the building and the surrounding neighborhood in shock. Miraculously, no one inside the building or on the ground was killed, though several people sustained injuries from the explosion and falling debris. One resident, who had been in her apartment just a few floors below the impact site, described the moment of the crash as like a bomb going off. She added, "The whole building shook, and I thought it was an earthquake. Then I saw the flames outside my window, and I knew something terrible had happened." Emergency responders arrived on the scene within minutes, their sirens cutting through the chaos as they worked to extinguish the flames and secure the area. Firefighters scaled the building to rescue trapped residents, while police officers cordoned off the streets to keep bystanders at a safe distance. The image of the burning high-rise, with smoke billowing into the clear blue sky, became an indelible symbol of the tragedy, evoking painful memories of the September 11th attacks just 5 years earlier. The investigation into the crash, led by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, revealed several factors that contributed to the accident. The Cirrus SR-20's flight path indicated that Lytle and Stanger had attempted a 180-degree turn within the narrow confines of the East River corridor, a maneuver that required precise control and adequate altitude. However, the plane's speed and angle of bank during the turn likely caused it to stall, leaving the pilots with little time to recover. The NTSB also noted that while the Cirrus SR-20 was equipped with a state-of-the-art parachute system designed to bring the aircraft safely to the ground in the event of an emergency, the system was not deployed, possibly because the pilots did not have enough time to activate it. The crash sparked widespread debate about the safety of flying in New York City's airspace, particularly for private pilots. Critics argued that the Hudson and East River corridors, while scenic and convenient, posed significant risks due to their heavy traffic and limited maneuvering space. Some called for stricter regulations, including mandatory air traffic control oversight for all flights in the area and increased training requirements for private pilots. Others defended the existing system, pointing out that the vast majority of flights through the corridors were completed without incident. For the sports world, the loss of Corey Lytle was a devastating blow. Lytle, who had played for several Major League Baseball teams during his career, was remembered not only for his talent on the field but also for his passion for life and his adventurous spirit. His teammates and fans mourned his passing, with many expressing disbelief that such a tragedy could occur. "Corey was one of those guys who loved to try new things," said a former teammate. "He was fearless, whether it was on the mound or in the cockpit. It's just heartbreaking that this happened." The crash also had a profound impact on the aviation community, prompting a reevaluation of safety practices and training programs for private pilots. Flight schools began placing greater emphasis on stall recovery techniques and the challenges of flying in urban environments. The incident also led to increased scrutiny of the Cirrus SR-20's parachute system, with some questioning whether more could be done to ensure pilots were trained to use it effectively in emergencies. In the years since the 2006 crash, the Hudson and East River corridors have remained popular routes for small aircraft and helicopters, but the lessons learned from Little's accident continue to influence aviation policy and practice. The tragedy serves as a reminder of the risks inherent in flying, particularly in crowded and complex airspace, and of the importance of vigilance, preparation, and respect for the challenges of the skies. For the residents of New York City, The memory of the 2006 crash lingers as a sobering chapter in the city's history. The sight of the burning high-rise, the sound of sirens echoing through the streets, and the stories of those who narrowly escaped harm are etched into the collective consciousness. It is a story of loss and resilience, of a community coming together in the face of tragedy, and of the enduring need to balance the thrill of flight with the responsibility of safety. The miracle on the Hudson in 2009 was a rare bright spot in this history, a moment of triumph that captured the world's attention, but even that miraculous event could not erase the river's darker tales. Here's an expanded account of the 2013 Hudson River incident, providing additional depth, human stories, and the broader impact of the event. In the summer of 2013, the Hudson River once again became the site of an aviation emergency, this time involving a seaplane carrying tourists on a scenic flight. While the incident did not result in any fatalities, it was a stark reminder of the challenges pilots face when navigating both mechanical failures and the unpredictable nature of water landings. The incident, though less dramatic than others in the Hudson's storied history, left a lasting impression on those involved and highlighted the importance of rigorous safety standards for sightseeing flights. The aircraft, a de Havilland Canada DHC-2 Beaver, was operated by a local tour company specializing in scenic flights over New York City. The seaplane, a robust and versatile model commonly used for such purposes, had taken off from a dock near the George Washington Bridge on a warm July afternoon. On board were 6 people, the pilot and 5 passengers, including a family of 4 visiting from the Midwest, and a solo traveler from Europe who had a passion for aviation photography. The flight was meant to offer breathtaking views of Manhattan, the Statue of Liberty, and the surrounding waterways. For the family, it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, a chance to see the city from a perspective they had only dreamed of. The solo traveler, a young woman from Germany, had booked the flight as part of her trip, documenting unique aviation experiences. The atmosphere on board was one of excitement and anticipation as the plane lifted off the water and climbed into the sky. Approximately 15 minutes into the flight, as the seaplane passed over the Hudson River near the Palisades, the pilot noticed a sudden drop in engine power. Warning lights illuminated on the instrument panel, and the engine began to emit a sputtering noise that quickly escalated into a full failure. The pilot, an experienced aviator with over 20 years of flight experience, immediately recognized the severity of the situation. With no viable landing strips nearby and the densely populated city below, he made the decision to attempt an emergency water landing on the Hudson River. The pilot's calm and decisive actions were critical in averting disaster. He alerted the passengers to the situation, instructing them to don their life vests and brace for impact. "We're going to have to land on the water," he said over the intercom, his voice steady despite the tension in the cabin. Passengers later described the moment as surreal, with some gripping their armrests in fear, while others stared out the windows at the river below. The descent was rapid but controlled, with the pilot carefully aligning the plane for a smooth touchdown on the water. Witnesses on the riverbank and nearby boats described the landing as remarkably skillful. "It was like watching a bird land on the water," said one boater who had been fishing nearby. "The plane just glided in and barely made a splash." The seaplane came to a stop on the river's surface, its fuselage intact and floating steadily. The pilot quickly began the evacuation, guiding passengers out onto the wings of the aircraft. The family of 4 huddled together, their young children clinging to their parents as they waited for rescue. The solo traveler, visibly shaken but composed, used her camera to document the scene, later describing it as the most terrifying and awe-inspiring moment of my life. Rescue boats arrived within minutes, their crews pulling the passengers and pilot to safety. The operation was swift and efficient, thanks in part to the pilot's decision to land near a busy stretch of the river where help was readily available. All 6 people on board were rescued without injury, a testament to the pilot's skill and the quick response of the local boating community. The aftermath of the incident was marked by both relief and reflection. The passengers, while grateful to be alive, spoke of the fear and uncertainty they felt during the emergency. The family, who had been traveling with their 2 young children, described how they tried to stay calm for the sake of their kids. "We just kept telling them it was going to be okay," the father said. "But inside, we were terrified." The solo traveler, whose photos of the incident later went viral, reflected on the resilience of the human spirit. "In that moment, we were all just people trying to survive," she said. "It didn't matter where we were from or why we were on that plane. We were in it together." The investigation into the engine failure revealed that a mechanical issue, likely related to inadequate maintenance, had caused the problem. This finding led to increased scrutiny of sightseeing tour operators and their adherence to safety regulations. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, introduced new guidelines for the inspection and maintenance of seaplanes, as well as stricter requirements for pilot training and emergency preparedness. The 2013 incident also reignited debates about the risks associated with sightseeing flights in urban areas. Critics argued that the growing popularity of such tours posed an unnecessary danger to both passengers and residents, while proponents defended them as a vital part of the city's tourism industry. The debate highlighted the need to balance economic interests with public safety, a challenge that continues to shape aviation policy today. For the pilot, the incident was a defining moment in his career. Though he had flown hundreds of hours before that day, he described the emergency landing as his greatest test. "You train for these situations, but you hope you never have to face them," he said. "When it happens, you just rely on your training and do everything you can to keep everyone safe." The 2013 Hudson River incident, while less dramatic than some of the river's other aviation stories, remains a powerful example of the importance of preparation, skill, and community in the face of adversity. It is a story of survival and resilience, of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. And like so many other events in the Hudson's history, it serves as a reminder of the unpredictable nature of flight and the enduring strength of the human spirit. And now, in April 2025, the Hudson has claimed more lives. The helicopter crash is a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of aviation, even in an era of advanced technology and stringent safety measures. The river, with its shimmering surface and calm demeanor, continues to bear witness to the fragility of human ambition. It is a place where triumph and tragedy coexist, where the line between life and death is often drawn in the span of seconds. Each incident, from the earliest biplane ditchings to the miracle on the Hudson and beyond, tells a story of courage, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of those who take to the skies. The Hudson River, for all its beauty and tranquility, remains a place of profound significance, a silent witness to the best and worst of humanity. As long as aircraft continue to traverse its skies, its story will continue to unfold, one chapter at a time.